Today we continue the story of the missing Arctic expedition led by Sir John Franklin. If you haven't seen our previous episode on this expedition, be sure to check it out. We left off at the point where the expedition had vanished somewhere in the ice, with no one able to find them and no one knowing what had happened. The only information available came from the Inuit, who claimed that the crew had died of starvation and had even resorted to cannibalism. This story caused an enormous scandal in England, and Sir John Franklin's widow, Lady Jane Franklin, embarked on a private search for the expedition after the Admiralty had already declared it lost. But the resolute Lady Jane Franklin refused to give up, and the idea of being left as the widow of a cannibal did not appeal to her at all. Lady Jane Franklin declined the title of widow and the military pension she was entitled to, and funded another expedition at her own expense. She purchased the steam yacht Fox, and on May 5th, a party led by Royal Navy Lieutenant William Hobson found the first document related to the missing expedition in a cairn built of stones. The document was essentially in two parts. The first part was dated May 28, 1847, and stated May 28, 1847. Her Majesty's ships Erebus and Terror wintered in the ice during the winter of 1846–47 at Beechey Island, after advancing up Wellington Channel to latitude 77 degrees north, and subsequently returning down the west side of Cornwallis Island. The expedition is under the command of Sir John Franklin. All is well. A party of 2 officers and 6 men left the ships on Monday, May 24, 1847. It was signed by Commander Graham Gore and Lieutenant Charles de Vere. At first glance, this letter may seem clear and straightforward, but in reality, it contained numerous errors. One of the most obvious mistakes was the date of the wintering at Beechey Island. The letter claimed that the ships wintered there during 1846–47, but it has been documented that the ships actually wintered there a year earlier, in 1845–46. Graves of sailors and some documents left behind confirmed this earlier date. Why the sailors in the note got the year wrong is unclear. Additionally, there were errors in the coordinates mentioned in the letter. Overall, the note was rather disorganized and did not follow standard format, as it should have included the coordinates of the ship's next destination and the plans for the expedition's route. None of this information was present. Moreover, the claim that all is well seemed misleading, as 3 crew members had already died by that time, making the statement confusing. The note did not report these casualties, even though the captain was supposed to do so in this type of document, which was intended as a form of delayed mail in case the expedition went missing, so search parties could trace their path. However, none of this clarity appeared in the letter. The note, as mentioned, was in 2 parts, and the second message was even more perplexing and ominous. It was written in the margins of the same piece of paper and dated April 25, 1848. Her Majesty's ships Erebus and Terror were deserted on April 22, 5 leagues north-northwest of this place, having been beset since September 12, 1846. The officers and crew, totaling 105 souls under the command of Captain Crozier, camped here. Coordinates were given. This note was found by Lieutenant Irving under a cairn believed to have been built by Sir James Ross in 1831, 4 miles north of where it was relocated. Sir John Franklin had died on June 11, 1847, and total expedition losses up to that point included 9 officers and 15 sailors. The signature read, Captain Fitzjames of Erebus and Crozier, Captain and Senior Officer. There were also brief mentions of future plans. Tomorrow, we set out for the Fish River. This detail was crucial for Lady Jane Franklin's privately organised search, as it confirmed that Sir John Franklin had died on June 11, 1847, meaning he could not have been involved in cannibalism or other disreputable behaviour, which Lady Jane quickly reported to the newspapers to restore his reputation. Despite this revelation, the search for the missing expedition continued. Over the years, the story became legendary, almost a form of folklore in England, and finding the lost expedition became a matter of honour. Many Arctic search expeditions were launched, each revealing new details. For example, the McClintock expedition found a human skeleton on the southern coast of King William Island with documents, including a sailor's certificate in the name of Harry Pegler, born in 1808, a deckhand. However, as the uniform on the skeleton was that of a ship's steward, it was more likely the remains of Thomas Armitage, who sometimes performed Pegler's duties and was a friend of Pegler. A notebook was found with notes that appeared to be written by both its owner and another unknown person. The notes, referring to the expedition's fate, were difficult to decipher. Some were encoded in an unknown cipher, and others were written backward, with words ending in uppercase letters, full of errors and lacking punctuation. When this diary was studied, it unsettled everyone. One fragment mentioned Lead Bay, and the second page began with the phrase, "O death, where is thy sting?" reminiscent of a funeral service opening. On the reverse side of the diary, notes were written in a circular pattern, surrounding the phrase, "Camp of Horror empty." On the western side of the island, Hobson discovered a lifeboat that appeared to have been pushed across the ice. Inside were 2 skeletons and personal belongings of the crew. Items found in the boat included boots, silk handkerchiefs, scented soap, sponges, combs, many books, sewing kits, sailors' gloves, loaded guns, knives, 2 rolls of sheet lead, and other items that Captain McClintock, who found the Grimm's sledge, considered strange for a sledging expedition. Indeed, if your ship is trapped in ice, you've been starving for some time, and you must drag heavy sleds hundreds of miles across the ice with no food or people around. Why would you take scented soap, silk handkerchiefs, and interesting books? The gear set was unusual and provoked reflection. On the back of one of the books, Christian Melodies, there was a dedication addressed to a certain G.G., possibly Lieutenant Graham Gore. The lifeboat itself was about 8.5 meters long and 2 meters wide, with provisions for sailing and weighing approximately 317 to 362 pounds. It rested on heavy sledges weighing 295 pounds. The supplies included tea and 18 kilograms of chocolate, as well as tobacco and an empty tin labelled pemmican, marked with an E, likely indicating it belonged to the Erebus. Among the sledge's contents were many utensils, 8 of which bore Franklin's coat of arms, while others had the emblems of other officers, except for one large fork without any markings. 5 belonged to the Erebus officers, 3 to the Terror, and 1 unidentified. Captain McClintock was surprised to find only 2 skeletons in the sledge when the item seemed intended for 30 to 40 people, making it clear that 2 people could not have pushed such a heavy sledge alone. It turned out that the search was insufficient. In the 1980s, thorough investigations at the site where the sledge stood revealed the remains of at least 14 more people. A boot found there was spiked, presumably for better traction on the ice. McClintock suggested that 2 men had been left with the heavily laden sledge to try to return to the ships, while the main group moved on. Searches did not stop there. 2 more expeditions between 1860 and 1869 led by Charles Francis Hall, discovered camps, graves, and many human remains on the southern coast of King William Island. Over the years, the missing Arctic expedition had become such an integral part of English folklore that there was a theory that some of the sailors had survived and lived among the Inuit. However, Francis Hall, who searched for the expedition, dismissed this idea. Unable to find any written records that would shed light on the fate of the expedition, he decided to approach the mystery differently and spent a significant amount of time living among the Inuit, gathering detailed accounts of the lost expedition. The Inuit had much to share, such as stories of visiting one of Franklin's ships and encounters with groups of white men on the southern coast of King William Island near Washington Bay. According to these accounts, parts of the crew did survive, only to die of starvation as they neared help. Why they did not seek help from the Inuit, or if they did, why it failed, is unknown. In hopes of finding further written records, U.S. Army Lieutenant Frederick Schwatka organized another expedition to the island between 1878 and 1880. He assembled a team, including Inuit, who had once assisted Hall, and set off northward on 3 sledges pulled by over 40 dogs. The expedition carried a modest amount of food but was well equipped with weapons and ammunition. Schwatka recorded the Inuit accounts and visited known and probable points on the expedition's route, as well as the wintering site on King William Island. During the expedition, he found the skeleton of Lieutenant John Irving. Though Schwatka did not find the desired documents, in his speech at a dinner held in his honor by the American Geographical Society in 1880, he stated that his expedition had undertaken the longest sled journey ever attempted, both in distance and duration. He spent 11 months and 4 days traveling, covering approximately 2,709 miles. He also noted that it was the first Arctic expedition of white people to rely entirely on a diet identical to that of the Inuit. Jumping to the early 20th century, in 1903 on King William Island, the famed polar explorer Roald Amundsen spent 2 full years there. According to his accounts, his team discovered many human remains, likely belonging to Franklin's expedition, and even buried some of them. This introduces an intriguing paradox. The search for Franklin's lost expedition contributed significantly more to the exploration of the Arctic than the actual expedition itself, which ultimately failed and produced nothing but the need for subsequent rescue missions. However, these search efforts achieved major breakthroughs in Arctic research, and even today, people continue to uncover new insights about these northern lands. From the array of artifacts and scattered information provided by the Inuit, we can piece together a rough account of what happened to Captain John Franklin's expedition. In the fall of 1845, Franklin's ships, Erebus and Terror, settled for their first winter on Beechey Island. This first winter was relatively uneventful and the sailors lacked for nothing. However, 3 men died of pneumonia and were buried in the frozen ground of the island, as detailed in previous accounts. In the summer of 1846, Franklin steered the ships westward, but by September, the ships were again trapped in ice a few miles northwest of King William Island. This marked their second winter. Captain Franklin had hoped to continue sailing the following summer, but the season was exceptionally cold and the ice never loosened its grip. The Erebus and Terror remained immobilized with dwindling supplies of food and coal for heat. On June 11, 1847, the 61-year-old Franklin died, and Captain Francis Crozier of the Terror took command of the expedition. He was the only officer with previous polar experience, having searched for missing whalers in the Arctic in 1835 and commanded the Terror in Antarctic voyages in 1839 and 1844. By spring 1848, it became evident that the ships would remain trapped, and the only option for survival was to abandon them. The crew, weakened by scurvy and exhaustion, faced the near impossible task of making the grueling journey south to the mainland before the deep freeze set in. Their dwindling rations, including spoiled canned goods, would likely not last the entire trek. The hope was to encounter Inuit along the way who could share food and teach them how to hunt. However, the Inuit seemed hesitant to approach these strange men who, according to some accounts, had already resorted to cannibalism. Though the sailors relied on hunting, the caribou, which inhabited the region, had migrated south due to the cold. Hunting polar bears, walruses, and seals required skills that none of the sailors possessed. They assumed that if the Inuit could survive in such conditions, then they, as highly intelligent Englishmen, could manage as well. But they were mistaken. The desperate crew fashioned sledges out of lifeboats to carry supplies. Weakened by 3 harsh winters, disease and hunger, they dragged these sledges, losing companions along the way. This lifeboat, later found by a search party, contained not only 2 skeletons but also books, soap, sewing supplies, gloves, 2 rolls of sheet lead, boots and silk handkerchiefs, both necessary and entirely impractical items for such an expedition. The only logical explanation was that the sailors intended to trade these trinkets with the Inuit for food, which they desperately lacked. The ships were equipped with Fraser's patented stoves, too large to take along. This meant that once they left the ships, the crew lost their ability to cook hot food, surviving instead on decayed meat and frozen soup heated on weak spirit stoves. The sailors couldn't melt ice for water, and by the time they built the sledges, 9 officers and 15 sailors had already died. None of the survivors had experience in Arctic travel on foot. Sir Franklin himself could have recounted how, in 1822, his team survived on lichen and leather during an Arctic trek. But by 1848, he was no longer alive. As a result, numerous mistakes were made in organising the march. The sledges were extremely heavy. By the summer of 1848, starvation struck those who reached King William Island, leading to severe hunger and death, not only from malnutrition and cold, but also from an unknown illness. The sailors faced a long, treacherous journey over ice to the mainland. Crozier aimed to reach the mouth of the Back River and intended to travel approximately 497 miles upstream to a settler outpost. It appears that the expedition split into 2 groups on King William Island. Those who stayed succumbed to starvation, resorting to killing and eating each other. The group that moved south on the ice reached the mainland coast, where Inuit reported seeing 35 to 40 emaciated white men at the mouth of the Back River. The Englishmen had exhausted all their provisions and, according to Inuit accounts, did not ask for help. While it's possible they did ask but were denied due to fears of cannibalism, none of them reached the settlement. Inuit accounts stated that Captain Crozier and 1 officer spent their last days in an Inuit village about 249 miles south of the coast, although they couldn't specify the exact date of their deaths. It is assumed they died in the early 1850s, possibly overlooked in subsequent searches. This marked the beginning of many theories as to why the expedition failed so catastrophically and what actually transpired during those years. The most accepted version in England was that the expedition members succumbed to cold and hunger. Tragic, but not unheard of in the Arctic. The only unacceptable detail was the rumour of cannibalism, which clashed with the image of English gentlemen and officers, not to mention Christians, consuming one another. Thus, although whispers circulated, they were considered mere gossip from the uninformed Inuit who might have fabricated the tale. The cannibalism theory grew increasingly unpopular, aided by a vigorous media campaign spearheaded by Lady Jane Franklin, who ridiculed the notion, leading the public to view it as mere native folklore. However, as time passed and technology advanced, 20th century bioarchaeologists from Canada and the UK uncovered new evidence supporting cannibalism among Franklin's crew. Analysing the bones, they found polished areas likely from being boiled in cooking pots. This study was published in the International Journal of Osteoarchaeology, where researchers revisited human bones discovered in the 19th and 20th centuries in the Canadian Arctic. They tested the hypothesis that if the crew did resort to cannibalism, it would have gone through several stages. In the final stage, when no muscle or other soft tissues remained, sailors may have boiled bone marrow from fractured bones. Inuit accounts supported this claim, though they were dismissed in England. Researchers noted 3 types of bone damage indicative of their use as food: burn marks from fire, fractures for marrow extraction, and polished surfaces from boiling in pots. While they didn't find burn marks and some fractures were difficult to identify definitively, likely due to later ice movement or animal activity, the polished marks were undeniable. Experiments showed such marks appeared when bones rubbed against cooking pot surfaces. Thus, it seems, the starving sailors boiled bones in pots, seeking marrow. Another compelling piece of evidence was knife marks on bones. In the mid-20th century, the theory emerged that members of the expedition might have suffered from lead poisoning due to the solder used to seal canned provisions. Anthropologist Laurie d'Hortensio and her colleagues conducted studies examining the hair of the ship's doctor, who had been reinterred in Britain. Hair grows at about 1 centimetre per month, so analysing it provided insights into the doctor's physical condition during the expedition. The studies revealed that the lead levels in the hair were higher than modern norms, though not high enough to fully support the lead hypothesis. It's likely that the doctor died during an extended foraging mission, with lead potentially entering his body from the canned food or, as anthropologists speculated, from medications containing lead. High lead concentrations found in the bones of the expedition members indicated that it had accumulated over a long period, possibly even before they left Britain during the height of the Industrial Revolution. At that time, knowledge of metal toxicity was limited. The situation was further complicated by the discovery of ice mummies on Beechey Island. In the 1980s, the bodies were exhumed and analyses confirmed that the lead content in their bones was 10 times higher than normal. While this was unlikely to be the primary cause of their deaths, it probably weakened their immune systems, which proved critical under such harsh conditions. The lead in the soda used for canned food was not the only factor, but it undoubtedly played a role in the tragic fate of the expedition. One detail that could support the lead hypothesis is related to the ship's engines. These ships were fitted with innovative steam engines that required about a ton of fresh water per hour for operation. To provide this, a unique distillation system was installed to desalinate seawater for the engines. It is not difficult to imagine that this desalinated water was also consumed by the crew. The issue was that the pipes in this distillation system were made of lead, and as water was repeatedly processed through these pipes, it accumulated significant amounts of lead. The sailors who drank this water were thus exposed to high levels of lead poisoning, not just from the solder in canned food contaminating their meals, but also through their water supply. An analysis of the sailors' bones supported this conclusion. Expert examinations, including autopsies of one of the ice mummies, revealed that the sailors suffered severe psychological and physical issues due to lead poisoning. Although the cause of death for this particular sailor was determined to be pneumonia, lead poisoning was cited as a contributing factor. This leads us to perhaps the most logical theory, which I also support. Franklin's expedition did not perish due to a single factor, but rather due to a multitude of issues that compounded like a snowball, ultimately leading to their demise. These included hunger, scurvy, extreme cold, and the mental and physical toll of being confined in tight quarters for years. The crew spent winters in their ships for prolonged periods, sitting in near total darkness, relying only on small kerosene lamps for light, while constantly freezing, starving, and suffering from vitamin deficiencies. Lead poisoning further impaired their cognitive functions. I would speculate that after years of wintering, a significant portion of the crew lost their sanity. This theory explains the disorganized notes with numerous errors, the apocalyptic messages in the sailor's diary with cryptic codes and circular entries, and the odd assortment of items found in the sledges, such as silk handkerchiefs, scented soap and books, things unnecessary for a sledge journey of hundreds of miles over ice. It might also partially explain the reported cannibalism and why the Inuit hesitated to help the desperate sailors. In Inuit culture, insanity is considered a taboo illness believed to bring misfortune to those who interact with the afflicted. It is possible that, seeing the men's erratic behavior, the Inuit kept their distance. As time went on, research continued and scientists discovered new artifacts. Global warming caused the ice to melt, revealing more remains from the lost expedition. A recent expedition uncovered new genetic samples, allowing researchers to identify the remains as belonging to 27 individuals of Western European descent, consistent with the expedition's crew. A fascinating experiment followed. Scientists compared the DNA they had with samples from descendants of the lost sailors. The first 16 attempts yielded no positive results. However, in 2019, a man contacted the researchers claiming to be a direct descendant of John Gregory, an engineer aboard the Erebus. DNA analysis confirmed that he was a fifth-generation descendant of Gregory, and the DNA matched one of the skulls found. Researchers concluded that they had identified Gregory among the 15 members who left the ship in late April 1848. He likely died in May 1848 at the age of 43 to 47. Additionally, the researchers reconstructed Gregory's face to provide an idea of his appearance. The fascination surrounding this tragedy has persisted for over 200 years. For example, in 2010, well-known survival expert and TV host Bear Grylls navigated the Northwest Passage in inflatable boats to draw attention to global warming. Where the ships Erebus and Terror once remained trapped for years, one could now easily pass through on an inflatable boat. We have focused so much on the men that we almost forgot about the ships themselves. Modern exploration brought new discoveries. In 2014, Erebus was found at a depth of 11 meters south of King William Island. The Canadians retrieved the ship's bell and one of its 10 cannons. On September 3, 2016, Terror was found as well. It was remarkably well preserved and appeared to have been sealed by the crew with doors, windows and other openings carefully shut. Abandoning a ship was considered a serious crime, and it seems the crew hoped to return for it when the ice finally released its hold. Divers discovered evidence suggesting that someone had tried to raise the ship's anchor, indicating that Terror might have been freed from the ice and that a crew member might have tried to sail it. Underwater archaeologists continue to study Erebus, noting that it is in worse condition than Terror, making it the current focus of their research to recover as much as possible before the ship disintegrates. They recover fascinating artifacts daily. One of the most intriguing finds was a leather-bound folio with pages inside and a quill tucked into its cover, as if someone had temporarily closed a journal or ledger intending to write in it later. This book was found in the steward's pantry, so it could be anything from an inventory list to a personal diary. Divers also explored several officers' cabins, finding items like lieutenants' epaulets still in their cases, the lenses of someone's glasses and other personal items. The most valuable find of the season might be a green box discovered in the cabin of Junior Lieutenant Henry Thomas Dundas, who was tasked by Franklin with chart-making. What was initially thought to be a book turned out to be a set of professional drawing tools. Besides this, a piece of paper was found in the lieutenant's cabin, sealed in a waterproof package. Researchers hope this might be the map that Franklin's expedition was working on. This is the long and complicated story of Franklin's lost expedition, which ended in tragedy due to a multitude of factors. Ultimately, I believe the primary factor was the negligence of the expedition's leadership. For instance, John Franklin chose the wrong route. In late August 1846, the ships reached King William Island, and Franklin had to decide whether to proceed along the west or east coast. According to protocol, such decisions required scouting by ice masters. The expedition had 2 experienced ice masters who could have reported that while the western route was shorter, it was prone to heavy pack ice driven by winds from the Arctic Ocean, whereas the eastern coast of King William Island was typically ice-free for an additional month. Nevertheless, Franklin decided to head west, and within a week his ships were locked in the ice. If they had gone east, the fate of the expedition could have been entirely different. This isn't just speculation. Only 50 years later, the Norwegian Roald Amundsen bypassed King William Island from the east and became the first to navigate the Northwest Passage. A century later, due to melting ice, this long-sought route became navigable in the summer months without icebreaker support. In the summer of 2016, a large cruise ship carrying about 1,000 passengers, each paying $22,000, traversed the route from Anchorage, Alaska, to New York. Along the way, this enormous ship passed King William Island and Beechey Island, where 129 sailors once survived 3 years of icy madness and became part of those places forever. This story has had a profound impact on English culture, inspiring countless books, novels and songs related to Franklin's expedition. One of the most notable modern works is Dan Simmons's 2007 novel The Terror, which was later adapted into a television series. If you enjoy this type of content, please like, comment and share your thoughts on this expedition. I read all your comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes, and I'd greatly appreciate it if you share this video with your friends.